PAS 2035 is the UK standard specification for retrofitting homes of all different types and ages, and that includes traditional buildings. You may be asking, what is a traditional building? Well, there's a definition of a traditional building in PAS 2035. Building construction consisting of solid brick or stone external walls or pre-1919 timber frame walls with any infill. So that's what a traditional building is. How many of them are there? Quite a few. Now, the normal way of classifying a traditional building in the UK is looking at when a building is built. And if it's built before 1919, that has traditionally been classified as a traditional building. But when you're looking at the definition from PAS 2035 and add that up into a BRE statistic, then we can say that it's not 25%, it's around about a third of all UK building stock is traditionally built. So that's about 8 million of them. When we are comparing traditional buildings with other buildings, there are some key differences. You can see that these two buildings look differently, but underneath the skin of what we're seeing, they are very different. Traditional buildings are vapor permeable in construction, very often with solid walls, whereas modern construction have impermeable materials and very often cavity wall construction. We need to understand that these buildings are different because they need to be treated differently. There are many examples where traditional buildings have been treated in the wrong way, in a modern way, which has led to disastrous consequences. The main thing we have to watch out for with traditional buildings is many of them have been treated as that they are modern buildings throughout their history. So modern materials, impermeable materials have been inserted, which has redirected moisture and has tended to concentrate moisture in certain areas, which have given rise to unintended consequences. So find out if those issues exist before we start retrofitting the building. We have the BSI Retrofit Standards Framework. The core document is PAS 2035. It contains standards, it contains the approach, but it also contains a process. And part of that process is the installation stage. And the installation stage is dealt with by PAS 2030, which is incorporated into that document. But because we're talking about traditional buildings, we've also got BS 7913. This is the UK standard for doing any work to a traditional, protected and historic building, and it's part of this framework. What does that mean for traditional buildings? Well, if you're going to follow this totally, then it means you are well guided in the approach you are going to take. But PAS 2035 only picks up on what BS 7913 is saying in a number of areas. One of the things that PAS 2035 does, it does differentiate different building types. That does mean that different traditional buildings will be put into different paths as well. Let's look at some of the key issues in PAS 2035. The one thing is commonly said to me is the right approach to take to buildings and retrofitting buildings is fabric first. Is that a right approach for a traditional building? Well, that's not what PAS 2035 says, because it says, in the case of older, traditionally constructed and protected buildings, a risk-based approach is usually appropriate, so now you know. A further key issue to be noted is technical. Traditional buildings are technically different. Even the way in which we are going to assess a building may be different to a modern building. The other thing is significance, heritage values. They need to be understood and dealt with in traditional buildings. Some key issues under PAS 2030. If a building is in risk path C, which means it's a traditional building that has special protection, then as far as the installation company is concerned, they must continually supervise their installation workforce. Another thing to emphasize is vocational competence. That's quite strong in PAS 2030. And of course, if you're working on a traditional building, you need to be competent in working on traditional buildings. PAS 2035 contains a lot on qualifications, memberships and competencies generally, and the main qualification that's mentioned for most individuals working under PAS 2035 is the Level 3 award in the energy efficiency and retrofit of traditional buildings. Some roles don't need this qualification, but I would say it's advisable to do so for the retrofit advisor, for example. The Retrofit Coordinator is the key role in PAS 2035, and yes, the Retrofit Coordinator needs this qualification because nearly all the time the Retrofit Coordinator will be the Retrofit Evaluator, and the Evaluator needs this qualification. Retrofit Assessors need this qualification if they're working under Risk Path C, but I think most people believe that in the next revision of PAS 2035 it will become a requirement for all Retrofit Assessors working all risk paths if they're working on traditional buildings. The Retrofit Designer does not need this qualification, but the Retrofit Designer does need to be a member of a Building Conservation Accreditation or Certification scheme, such as the RIBA scheme, CIOB scheme, and there are others around as well. And as I've emphasised already, yes, the Retrofit Evaluator needs this qualification. And if you require any more information on this, then go to the Environment Study Centre website. The website address is at the bottom of this slide. So if you need the qualification or you want to demonstrate to others that you have got a certain level of knowledge in traditional building retrofit, then you know what to do. Sign up for the course. You'll be in good hands. You'll be in my hands. I'm Professor John Edwards. I created and teach this course, and I have been doing so for many years, where I've seen hundreds of people qualified and get this qualification. So if you want to be one of those people, you know what to do. Sign up for this course, and I look forward to seeing you.